Now, what happens now is that we have about 15 minutes, and we are very happy to take your questions. And there are microphones on either side. Hello there, back there, and back here. So stand up, go to the microphone, ask a question, and please identify yourself and ask a question, because if you don't, I'll cut you off. Mean that I am. Over there in the darkness, could I see somebody? Hello?
Hi, I'm Francisco Alvarez from Central Florida. My question is, I read an article about how a failure of this last round of, in this last election season is that we didn't focus enough on policy, that we focused on personality. But when I go back and look at the debates, I think there were a lot of solid questions about policy, but candidates answer questions the way they want to answer them. And they realize that a lot of people don't want to have a very detailed discussion of tax policy. So what is your reaction to that? Do you think that we focused enough on policy and that politicians just answered the way they wanted to, or there wasn't enough of a focus on policy?
Did you address that to any one of the four panelists?
Raditz and Wallace.
Okay.
Yeah.
The moderators.
Hey, Raditz and Wallace, let's go.
Yeah. An anchor team for the 21st century.
Yes, I mean, we definitely want to talk about policy, and you definitely want to guide it back to the policy questions when you're in the middle of a debate, and it doesn't always work. Actually, exactly what you said is what happens. They're going to answer it and take it in a direction they want to do it. You try to steer them back to the policy. I do think this was a pretty personality-driven campaign, without question. I know we try to move to the issues, and that we try to, not just in the debates, but in our general news coverage as well, to talk about the issues, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and I agree with that completely about the debates, in terms of news coverage, we do talk about the issues, but I will say, and this is nothing new, this has been true as long as I've been in journalism, which is that the horse race is always fascinating, and who's up and who's down, and it isn't especially enlightening, but you can't ignore it. And if a candidate is, either soaring or sputtering, that's part of the story too. But we really do try our best to get to the issues, particularly in the debates. And as Martha says, sometimes they answer and sometimes they don't. And we don't have power to a limited degree we do, as I say when I was asking Hillary Clinton about pay to play as an issue, but to a certain degree they're going to do what they want to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Over here to the right, please.
Hello. My name is Yaman Kaskin. I entered into the United States back when it used to be legal as an immigrant in 1980. My understanding of journalism is embedded in me by movies like All the President's Men, which is why I appreciate being here tonight and appreciate being in the presence of two great journalists. So my question is to you, Chris, and to you, Martha. We all have regrets as humans, as 50% of our country does today. If you could rewind the tape and go back to the last debate, what question would you have asked the candidates that you wish you had asked?
Climate change.
Poverty, homelessness. All right, can I say something? And I probably shouldn't do this, and here's where I would disagree with you, Mike, on this, because I thought about it, and I was getting a lot of, you get a lot of emails of people suggesting questions. It's not just they're writing to you, they're also writing to us. I thought there were a lot of big issues that hadn't been discussed in depth that I wanted to ask. I did think about climate change. There are some subjects, and I know a lot of you aren't going to like what I'm going to say. I'm not saying that the issue isn't important, but I'm not sure that climate change is the best 15-minute debate topic. I think it gets technical fast. Either it gets technical fast or it gets general fast, as opposed to things like, what are you going to do about entitlements? Where are you on deportation or sanctuary cities? Those are clear obvious topics. It's a little, I think climate change can be a little bit like grasping at clouds, and it's a hard 50, I've thought about it a lot as a topic, but it's not an easy 15-minute topic.
Okay.
You know, but that goes back to what the challenge is to you, is to kind of figure out how do you take a difficult subject like that and draw out of the candidates something that gives us some sense of what's going to happen if they get elected. And we didn't, you know, now in retrospect, I think back to the debates, I'm not sure that we drew out of either Secretary Clinton or Mr. Trump enough information about what would you really do if you're going to be in office. And I fully appreciate that getting that substantive is very, very hard to do. But, you know, we're now in the post-campaign, post-election time. Now we have to deal with the reality that one of those elected is governing. And we are shocked every day that we are surprised by all the corrupt, you know, stuff that's being suggested. And maybe if we had used the debates to elicit more of that, that would be more helpful to us where we are right
Okay.
now. That's my point.
But, I mean,
No, come on.
Okay,
We gonna-
all right.
Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Holly Goldberg from South Florida, and I'm a journalism student of Mike Friedman's. I have a question for Chris. You said that the journalist's role is to follow public opinion and not lead public opinion. But journalism is they're kind of responsible for being the agenda setters. So how do you differentiate following the public opinion and leading the public opinion and having to consider your viewership and getting views and, you know, how leaving Donald Trump's mic on to get more views? How do you balance leading public opinion and following public opinion?
Well, I guess I brought that up. I just want to make it clear to anybody that has any doubts. I was saying that was a bad thing that we did, where I was speaking also to the issue that some people say we were favoring Donald Trump or building Donald Trump up. I think we're just, because if you put him on TV, people liked it, which I thought was an irresponsible decision. I don't know that we're supposed to do anything about, we're not supposed to shape public opinion one way or the other. We're supposed to report the news and let people decide for themselves what they think. And, you know, it's not our job. We're not there to shape or to follow or anything public opinion. We're there to report the news. People can make up their own minds.
No, miss, hold on. We got a lot of questions. Got to go to other people. Over here, please.
Hi, my name is Rachel Oswald. I'm a reporter with CQ Roll Call. This question is for the panel, including you, Marvin. It's about the relevancy, actually, of the presidential debates. I'm saying that as someone who really, really wants them to be relevant. But as you said earlier tonight, we had 100 million people tuning into the first presidential debate. Myself and I think many of the other people in their analysis of the debate thought that Clinton overall won the debates, came off as more presidential, had more control of herself and the policy and her temperament. But then Donald Trump won the Electoral College. And if there
What is your question?
My question is, given that you had 100 million people watching and one candidate was seen as doing stronger in the debates, what does that mean that the candidate who was seen as being the weaker debater won the election? What does that mean for the debate's ability to influence the voters? Or are we in a Washington bubble, us journalists who are watching the debates and saying this person did better, and we have fundamentally different takeaways?
Okay. Frank.
You are in a bubble. The bubble, there are three bubbles in this country, and they're echo chambers. One starts on the East Coast of Boston, comes down through Hartford, goes to New York, goes down from Wilmington, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington. It goes up, and it's the New York Times, Washington Post bubble. Then you go out to Seattle, and you come down from Seattle to Portland to San Francisco, LA, and that's the LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle bubble. And then you've got a small bubble around the Great Lakes. If you look at the map where the red is and where the blue is, you'll see that's what happened. And what happened was that bubble around the Great Lakes broke this time. He broke that blue bubble there. Your determination as to who won the debate depends on what you were looking for. The point I made before is that the American people, and having done 30 of them, aren't necessarily looking for the smartest candidate. They're gaining something out of it. He was talking to someone totally different than you, and they voted for him.
Berman, here's a great statistic that comes out. In average, 10% of the American people have a postgraduate degree or post-undergraduate degree or graduate degree of some sort. Hillary Clinton won all 18 states in where people have above that 10% average, all the states in which people have more higher degree, more likely to have a graduate degree, and only won 3 of those below 10%. So Frank's argument is the smart people voted for Clinton.
Hold it.
And the smart people aren't always right, Mike.
Let that sit. You got another question here?
Hi.
Another question?
Hi, Sam Hussein. I live in Riverdale, Maryland. I hope this doesn't degenerate into a technical global warming type question, but I do have a very specific question about something that Mike McCurry alluded to, and that's the 15% exclusion criteria. This isn't a nonpartisan group. This is a bipartisan group that you're both former.
Not so. They're not. It's a nonpartisan group. You're wrong, sir.
You're both Democrats or Republicans, and so
Not
on.
everyone on the commission is, sir. I'm just going to correct you with
It's
the facts.
always been headed by the former heads or prominent officials of either the Democrat or Republican Party. It was founded by
Paul
the
Kirk and I
Democratic
founded
and
it, that's
Republican parties. You
What's
and
your
Paul Kirk.
question? So I'll be happy
My
to
question
answer
is a very specific one, and I hope that I can actually
Okay.
say it. It's your criteria is 15% in the quote-unquote major polls. When some people came forward and said, let's set up another criteria that, for example, if 50% of the American people wanted somebody else to be on, then they should be included as well. And the then heads of the commission, or actually it was Paul Kirk and Alan Simpson, who was on the board, said that's a ridiculous criteria. The only question that matters is who you want to be president. There's a problem here, and the problem is that no poll asks the American public who they want to be
Excuse me, sir.
president. It's a very
Excuse me.
specific question, and it's a very legitimate
You've
question.
asked your question.
No, I
think.
haven't. No
All right,
poll-
well, ask it. Go ahead.
No poll is asking the American public who they want to be president. Every poll asks.
Ask
What's
your
the question? Yeah.
Every poll asked, if the election were held today, who would you vote for? That's a different question, and it would result.
Is that the question you're asking?
Why aren't you abiding by
There
your
you go.
own criteria?
We are. And we've been sued in every election cycle other than 2008 with the question of what the criteria is and whether or not we're following the standards that the commission was set up with. Now, I must be candid with you. We constantly look at the criteria between every single series of debates to determine. There's some on the commission who thinks it should be higher. Some thinks it should be lower. Others think and have volunteered that everybody who's on enough ballots to conceivably get 270 electoral ought to be included. We will go through it every time. We decided to go with the League of Women Voters, who in 1980 adopted the 15% rule. That was a debate most people forget, where the President of the United States refused to participate because someone who was above 15, John Anderson, was invited to participate. So the question of what the criteria should be, we get input every 4 years. We look at it hard. We did it again this time and decided that the 15% rule established by the League of Women Voters was one that we should stick
And
with.
let me add one thing to that. If ever there were an election where we had 2 major party-nominated candidates that were not regarded favorably by a majority of Americans, where there was an opportunity for a third-party independent candidate to actually inspire people, get support, get above 15%, this was the election. The fact is that neither Governor Gary Johnson nor Dr. Jill Stein generated that kind of enthusiasm. So the problem wasn't our problem, it was their problem.
Okay, thank you both. That was very interesting. Next question, please.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Hellman. I am formerly with CNN and MSNBC. This question is for Ms. Raddatz and Mr. Wallace. You spoke about some of the great reporting that was done during this campaign season, New York Times, Washington Post, and others, and I agree with you. However, it was found that the majority of stories that were shared, the stories that were shared the most, came from these more alternative sources of news that turned to be fake news from these fringe sites. I'm curious to see your thoughts on what you think led to this growth of it seems, acceptance that the people have had in these kind of stories. Because as we saw, obviously, in this past weekend, what it turned out at one of the pizzerias here in D.C. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the
Okay.
acceptance of this.
Okay.
Well, junk sells, and it always has. I'm sure there were times when the circulation nationally for the National Enquirer was greater than the New York Times. It's challenging for the democracy, but it doesn't change our job as journalists, which is to do the best reporting and most honest reporting we can. And as I say, there's going to be more noise out there, and the world is changing. People were saying to me, I was quoted an article in the New York Times about whether or not we should be reporting Donald Trump's tweets, and my reaction is, if it's newsworthy, absolutely. I talked about when I was in 1980, when I was covering, or 82, when I was covering Reagan, and he'd go out to the helicopter and people would shout a question, and he'd give a quick answer, and
No answer.
what?
Or no
go,
answer.
huh? But some of the times he was giving an answer, and it was off the cuff, but it was interesting, it was news, and we reported
He
it.
might be tweeting all the time if he were president
He
today.
w-
You never know.
He probably would.
Bill Clinton,
Okay, we've got-
Bill Clinton used to give answers coming back from McDonald's after his morning jog, and we stopped him from doing that.
We have
just
time.
quickly, there's just more social media. It's just spreading and spreading and spreading, and nothing's stopping it. And people need to sit back and figure out that this is fake news, a lot of it is out there. I don't know how they do that, but.
Well, I think we've run out of time again. I want to thank you guys very, very much. It has been great fun. Great fun. And thank you all for being with us. Thank you very, very much.